Hello viewers. So in this video we are going to discuss one of the database management topic. So that is weak entity set in entity relationship diagram. Okay. So first thing is that we need to understand what is weak entity in ER diagram. Okay, and how it is differentiated from strong entity. Okay, so as we know, like in strong entity basically we have the primary key. Okay, so the primary key have the capability to uniquely identify each instance of one entity type. Okay, we'll discuss some of the next video will discuss like what is entity set and entity type. Okay, but in this video we are going to focus on weak entity only. Okay, so how it is differentiate. Okay, so weak entity is an entity that cannot be uniquely identified by its own attribute. Okay, so suppose we can take example one entity is there like dependent. Okay, we'll cover that part in the next. Let me cover this one. Okay, this means the data it contains is not enough to distinguish from each instance of one entity. Okay, and weak entity does not have a primary key. Instead, it has one partial key that is called discriminator. Okay, so this line is important. It's coming to the exam. Okay, so weak entity don't have like primary key. Only it has the partial key. We'll discuss that part. What is the meaning of that partial key and how it is differentiated from the primary key. Okay, and weak entity how it is represented in the entity relationship diagram. The weak entity is represented by double rectangle, and the relation between strong and weak entity is represented by double diamond. Okay, we'll cover that part in the next video. Okay, then first thing is that we need to understand what is partial key. Okay, basically we know like every normal entity that is called a strong entity have the primary key. Okay, but what is partial key? Okay, the partial key which is alternative called as discriminator, because sometimes it is coming at that keyword is coming the partial what is the meaning of this discriminator? It is only the partial key. Okay, the partial key is an attribute or set of attributes that helps uniquely identify instance of weak entity, but only with the context of related strong entity. We'll cover that part. Okay, suppose we have like one relationship like employee and dependent. Okay, suppose we can consider some database design like a company database, and in company database we have different entities are there. Okay, entity type, that is called entity type. Like one is employee, another is dependent. Okay, so we want to make a relationship between two entity like employee and dependent. Okay, so first thing is that let me yeah let me show you some figure. Okay, so you can see we have two entity, one is employee, another is dependent. Okay, so here one important thing is that employee can be exist in the company. Okay, but there is no existence of dependent if the employee is not exist. Okay, because employee is working on the company. Okay, but dependent is not working. Okay, but if the employees exist, then dependent can be exist. Okay, so that's why this dependent is fully dependent on employee. Okay, so as I told you, the relationship should be mentioned like I mean represented using double rectangle, sorry, double diamond symbol. Okay, we'll cover that part. Then another thing is that how the dependent is uniquely identified within the context of strong entity. Strong entity here is employee. Okay, so the dependent name might serve as the partial key for the weak entity that is dependent. Okay, we'll cover that part. Again, we come to this figure. Suppose employee, we have like different instance of employee, that is employee 1 and name is Rohan, and employee 2 and name is Ronak. Okay, and similarly we have dependent instances are there. These are called as the entire row. Okay, suppose we can take like 1 Tanaya sister and 23, entire row is called as entity. Okay, these are the instance of dependent entity type. Okay, we'll cover that part in the next video. Okay, suppose you can see one employee is like employee one, he has like two dependent. Okay, so suppose Tanaya and Neha both are dependent of employee one. Okay, and how they are what is the relationship? What the relationship is like, both are sister and both are having age like 23. Okay, but why it is not uniquely identified? This dependent name is not uniquely identify instance of dependence. Okay, why? Because suppose employee 1 have these two dependent, maybe there is chance like employee 3 or employee 4, employee 5 like that is coming, and they have like, suppose we can take pick like employee number 5 is coming, employee ID 5 is coming, but his dependent is like same like Tanaya and Neha, and both are related to employee 5 like they are sister of employee 5, and they are belongs to, I mean they are having age like 23. So in this case we cannot uniquely identify each instance of dependent without employee number. Okay, so there is no guarantee. So that's why in this line you can see why it is partial key. Okay, so it uniquely identify instance of weak entity only within the context of related strong entity, that is employee. Okay, so that's why it is called as partial key, because it cannot uniquely identify entire instance of that dependent table. Okay, or dependent relationship. So dependent name might serve as partial key for the weak entity. Okay. So dependent name, a dependent cannot be uniquely identified dependent name alone, as we discussed already. Okay. So many employee might have the dependent with the same name. Okay. So like as I give example, like employee 1 have the same dependent name, employee 5 have the same dependent name. Okay, it has total participation in the relationship with the employee, because employee is a strong entity. Okay, so it has to, the key point is like weak entity should have total participation with strong entity. That is, a dependent cannot exist in the system without being associated with the employee. As I told you, like employee should work with company. Okay, in the company database design, employee should work with, I mean, employee existence is coming as like employee is working with company. Okay, but dependent is not working. They are not recruited for the to work with the company. Okay, so they are exist as long as employee exist in the company. Okay, so that's why every dependent should be fully participate. This is called total participation or fully participation. Okay, Uh, the meaning is like every instance of dependent should be linked with strong entity. Okay, so there is no chance like, let me tell you, like some employees coming, some employees, sorry, dependent is there like Neha sister, or some other other like dependent is there, Neha sister 23 is there. Okay, but I can say like this dependent is not linked to any employee. We cannot say like that one. Okay, because every dependent should be linked with one employee. Otherwise, this employee should, I mean, this dependent should not be exist. So that's why it is called fully participation or called total participation. Okay. Okay, so when you are designing the database, so that time you should know like the dependent name is not unique. Okay, so dependent name is not unique, because suppose the employee one have the dependent name Tanaya, and employee 5 also dependent name Tanaya. Okay, but but how we can identify this employee, this Tanaya is linked to employee one, and that Tanaya is linked to this employee 5, because of this employee ID. Okay, so we need to combine the strong entity primary key with the partial key of the weak entity. Okay, we'll discuss that part, that is called the composite key. So these are the design considerations. So basically you are performing this ER diagram design, or you are doing the normalization. We'll cover that part. So we have 3 points here because the last point basically used for the normalization time, and these 2 points are the key points, and basically the second point is used for the what is called the ER diagram. Okay, so we'll discuss that part. So every weak entity must be connected to a strong entity through the identifying relationship. This keyword, okay, that is the strong entity. Okay, so every weak entity must be connected to a strong entity through this relationship. That is identifying relationships. So this keyword you can remember because sometimes coming in the question. And weak entity must be fully participate in the identifying relationship. It cannot partially participate to the relationship. And one more important thing is that when you are designing the database, that is the normalization, so that time it is useful. Okay, combine how the instance of weak entity is identified, because the because they don't have primary key, so that's why how it is uniquely identify each instance of dependent in here, like it is called as weak entity. So simple, you can combine this strong entity primary key with weak entity partial key, so that it will create one key called as composite key, which have the capability to uniquely identify each instance of weak entity, that is dependent in this case. Okay, now we can discuss this part. Suppose you have like one strong entity, that is employee, and strong entity is identified by its primary key, that is employee number, which is unique for every instance of employee. Okay, these are the one entity. You can see this is first row, this is second row, these are the entity instance, this is the second one is also entity instance. Okay, also this entire set is called that entity set of type, which type, employee type. Similarly, in the dependent case, we have like 4 instances of entities are there. They are, if you combine everything, so this is called as dependent set. Okay, so here you can see like employee, how the employee are dependent are linked. So the relationship type is like has a relationship. Okay, so one employee, you can see one employee has come many dependent. Okay, so now we need to discuss like how this thing is represented in ER diagram. You can see employee number is like score, like marked as like some solid underscore. Okay, but you can notice here in dependent this name is marked as like dotted. Okay, so because this is a partial key, always the primary key is mentioned is like this strong line. Okay, and this like bold line or something, what you called. Okay, but in partial key, but in the weak entity, the partial key is the, I mean, marked as with a dotted line. Okay, so from here you can identify this should be a partial key. Okay, and why this double line is here, you can see in Haj, you can see double line is there because dependent is fully participate in this relationship. Okay, so that is the thing. Also you can take some of the other example. Also you can see like department is there and another is course relationship is there. Okay, so suppose one college is there or university is there. Okay, here you have like several departments are there, like computer science department, civil department, electronics department is there. Okay, so how, so why this course is is a weak entity and it is fully participate with the department, because if suppose we can take example like one department like computer science department is there, but one course is like what is called like network security course is there, or something operating system course is there. Okay, so suppose after 1 month or something we decided like the computer science department should not exist. Okay, so that time there is no existence of operating system course. Okay, so that's why the course should be dependent on department. Until unless the department is there, the course should be there. If you delete this department, then there is no existence of the course. Okay, so that's why this one is called as weak entity, this course, and department is called as strong entity. And weak entity have the partial key, that is course number. Okay, so which can like identify this instance of the course. Okay, so similarly the department has the department name or department code, whatever you called, is as strong, that is the primary key. Okay, so that's why it is marked as bold. But here you can see course number is marked as partial key, that is dotted line, that is partial key, because it cannot uniquely identify each instance of course. But when it is combined with the strong entity primary key, that is called as composite key, if you combine this course number with the department number, then they makes the composite key, which have the capability to identify each instance of weak entity, that is course. Okay, and okay, so and last thing, what is the difference between strong entity and weak entity? This is the summary. You can see the features is like primary key. So strong entity have the primary key, but weak entity don't have primary key, but instead they have another key, that is called partial key. It is coming in the question. Okay, I mean in the, sometimes in the exam it is coming. What is discriminator? Discriminator is nothing but it is partial key of the weak entity. Okay, then another thing is that, so the strong entity can be exist independently without depend on any other entity, but but this weak entity cannot be exist without relating to the strong entity. Okay, so that's why it should always participate, I mean always depend, its existence only coming when there is strong entity is linked to. Okay, so then how it is represented in entity relationship diagram, that is ER diagram, a single rectangle. Okay, so already we know, like in you can see one single rectangle is there, department. Okay, but you can see in the course there is double rectangle, means this one is a weak entity. Okay, double rectangle in, you can see double rectangle in ER diagram, weak entity can be represented. Then how it is what is the relationship type? In ER diagram the relationship is like regular relationship, like single diamond, but for the weak entity you can see it is always double diamond, since the department offers course. Okay, this course is offered by department, so that's why, but this one is a weak entity. So how they are represented, this relationship should be represented by double rectangle, two, I mean two rectangle kind of thing. Okay, and what is the participation? The strong entity, basically there is chances like between two strong entity like employee and department. Okay, they have like fully participation or partial participation, because they both are strong entity. But in case of dependent, because dependent cannot be exist without strong entity like employee in this case. Okay, so that's why always the total participation is required to identify a relationship between weak entity and strong entity. Okay, so that's overall things, how to identify strong entity and how you can represent in the entity relationship diagram, and we'll cover that part like what is the use of composite key in normalization. Okay, so thank you guys.